In this video, we're going to review how to order decimals in an efficient strategy so you're very accurate. If I asked you which of these numbers were bigger, my guess is you'd have an answer right away, because you would take a look and say, well, especially if I'm thinking about money, this is 3,400 and this one's 3,600, so clearly this is the bigger number. I knew that just by looking at my place value. You're going to do the same exact thing when you order decimals. So let's look at how looking at your place values can help you. I'm going to start with these two decimals at the bottom. So if I look at this first one right here, and I color that in on a grid, I say, well, there's no tenths, there's only 5 hundredths. Now I'm going to look at the decimal below it and say, well, that 5 is actually in the tenth spot, so I'd have to color in 5 rows of 10. So that's a much bigger number than 5 hundredths. So right away, I know that this number is bigger than the other. The way I like to do it is I like to almost highlight my tenths place and just take a look at comparing those. Because if I think about what I would have to color in, here I'd have to color in 3 rows of 10. Here I'd color in 4 rows of 10. Here I'd color in 2, none, and then 5. So looking at that, it's a little easier to think about my order. My smallest decimal is going to be the one that had no tenths. Next, I'm going to look through and say, oh, well, here I only have 2 tenths, so this is my next smallest one. Cross them out as I go. And then 3 tenths, and then 4 tenths, and then 5 tenths. Don't let the number after it confuse you, because really, if you wanted to, what you could do is you could almost fill in zeros here to make it a little easier. Because when I color in 3 tenths, I'm really coloring in 30 hundredths. So now I can compare 30, 45, 20, 5, and 50 a little bit easier. So let's work with these new decimals, and this time we have decimals that are a little longer. They're in the thousandths place. I'm still going to use the same exact strategy. My first step is always to line my decimal points up and rewrite all my decimals so that I could draw a line through my decimal point. With thousands, it's a little harder to see, so what I like to do is I like to fill in zeros so that they all have 3 digits each, because now it's a little easier for me to compare them and see where my numbers line up. So I'm going to highlight my tenth spot and start there to see where my smallest decimal is. And right away, I see that I have 2 zeros. So one of those has to be my smallest. So when I have 2 zeros, I have to also look at the next place value. This is really like 15, and this one's only 5, because here's a 1, and this one only has a 0. So I can tell right away that 5 thousandths is going to be my smallest decimal. So now I'm done with that. After that, because this other one had 0 tenths, well, right away I know that has to come next. So I'm done with 2 decimals. So now I can keep looking for where my next decimal would be. Right away I notice that both of these have 1 tenth. So that has to be next, because this is 4 tenths and this is 2 tenths. So those are much bigger. So even though these decimals were longer, they're going to be smaller because only 1 tenth would be colored in. So I'm going to take a look at the whole number, 135 or 150. Well, I know from what I know about whole numbers that 135 is smaller. So that's my next decimal. And then 150 thousandths would go next. That leaves me with 2 decimals. These are easier to order because this only has 2 rows of 10 colored in, and this one would have 4 rows of 10 colored in. So right away I know 2 rows of 10 colored in would be a less amount to color in. So that's how I'm going to order those decimals. So let's review the strategies you have for when you're ordering decimals. The first thing you're going to do is line up your decimal points. After that, write in zeros so they have the same number of digits like I did on the last problem. Then you're going to look at the first place value. If you're still stuck, get your hundredths grid out and color it in. There's no problem with you using a hundredths grid until you get more comfortable with ordering decimals.